judged for his appearance. This farmer's next move silenced the doubters for good. The sun was barely peeking over the horizon as Matthew Parker stepped out of his dusty truck in the airport's private hangar lot. His boots crunched against the gravel, the scent of fuel and fresh morning dew mingling in the air. The hum of nearby aircraft engines set a backdrop for what Matthew hoped would be one of the most important days of his life. He adjusted his wide-brimmed hat, the same one he'd worn for decades working the fields. His denim shirt and weathered overalls hinted at long days of labor, the kind of work that left hands calloused and shoulders strong. Matthew was no stranger to skepticism or sideways glances. But today was different. He was here to fulfill a vision born from years of hard work, determination, and a dream to revolutionize his business. Walking into the hangar, Matthew was greeted by gleaming jets lined up like trophies, their polished surfaces reflecting the golden morning light. Inside, a few suited men milled about, deep in conversation. As Matthew approached the reception desk, a tall man in a crisp gray suit caught sight of him. His eyes darted to Matthew's boots, then back up, taking in the faded clothes and straw hat. The man's polite smile wavered for a fraction of a second before he approached. "Good morning," Matthew said, extending a hand. "I'm here to see about buying a jet." The man's brow lifted, his smile tightening. "You're here to buy a jet?" His tone was carefully neutral, but the pause said more than words ever could. Matthew had faced doubters before and knew exactly how to handle what was coming next. Matthew hadn't always been the man walking into an airport hangar to buy a jet. He'd built his life from the ground up, literally. Born and raised in a small farming town in rural Georgia, he grew up watching his parents struggle to keep their farm afloat. They taught him two things that stuck: never let your circumstances define you, and always find a way to adapt. By his early 20s, Matthew had inherited the family farm. The fields stretched wide, but the profits were razor-thin. For years, he poured every ounce of energy into finding ways to survive. He tried it all, selling at local markets, taking on seasonal labor, and even working odd jobs during tough winters. Nothing seemed to be enough. That all changed the day Matthew decided to stop following tradition and start innovating. While other farmers stuck to selling their produce in nearby towns, Matthew thought bigger. He realized that if he could ship his crops to cities across the country, he could cut out the middleman and reach more customers directly. It wasn't easy. Banks didn't trust him, and neighbors called him foolish. But Matthew pushed forward. His first big break came when he secured a contract with a grocery chain in Atlanta. Matthew invested in refrigerated trucks, hired workers, and built a small empire. Over the next decade, he expanded beyond crops, adding dairy and meat to his operation. By the time he turned 50, his farm was supplying food to over 10 states, with customers relying on him for fresh, quality products. Now at 57, Matthew had another bold idea: direct delivery by air. A jet would make it possible to transport his produce faster than any competitor, giving him an edge and ensuring freshness like never before. To Matthew, the jet wasn't just a luxury. It was a tool that could elevate his business to a new level. But stepping into a space dominated by corporate executives and millionaires, Matthew knew he wouldn't look the part. That didn't matter to him. His success wasn't measured by his clothes or how he looked. It was measured by the lives he'd touched, from his workers to the families eating the food his farm produced. Back in the hangar, the salesman's eyes darted to Matthew's boots again, this time lingering on the mud caked around the edges. "And what kind of jet are you interested in?" he asked, his tone polite but edged with skepticism. Matthew smiled, the kind of smile that carried the weight of 1,000 sunrises over the fields. "Something reliable," he said, "that can carry fresh produce across the country without a hitch." The salesman's reaction was far from encouraging, and Matthew could sense the storm brewing just beneath the surface. The salesman cleared his throat, adjusting the cuff of his perfectly tailored sleeve. His name tag read Elliot Blake, and everything about him, from the shine on his shoes to the precision of his haircut, screamed sophistication. Elliot gestured toward the showroom area, where sleek jets rested like museum pieces on polished floors. "Well, Mr. Parker," he began, emphasizing the name as if he wasn't sure it belonged to Matthew. These aircraft are designed for a particular clientele. Are you certain this is what you're looking for? Matthew didn't miss the hesitation. He'd heard it too many times before. Sometimes subtle, sometimes loud and clear. But he wasn't here to argue. I know what I need. Matthew replied evenly. I've done my research. Elliot's smile faltered. Of course, he said, leading Matthew to a jet parked under bright overhead lights. This is the Maverick 300. It's ideal for business use. Seats 8 comfortably, with excellent cargo capacity. Starting price is $3.5 million. The way Elliot said the number, it was as though he was daring Matthew to flinch. Instead, Matthew nodded thoughtfully, stepping closer to the jet. He ran his hand along the smooth exterior, his fingers tracing the craftsmanship. How much weight can it handle? Matthew asked, his voice steady. Elliot hesitated. It depends, he said carefully, choosing his words. Most of our clients use it for executives and their luggage. Are you sure it's suitable for your needs? Matthew turned to face him, his expression calm but unyielding. I'm transporting produce, not passengers. The weight specs are critical. Elliot blinked, clearly thrown off. Produce? He repeated, the word hanging in the air as if it didn't belong in the conversation. He glanced at Matthew's boots again, the faintest trace of disdain flickering across his face. Mr. Parker, this is a luxury jet. It's not exactly a delivery truck. The word stung, but Matthew refused to let it show. He knew Elliot's type, men who measured worth by the cut of a suit, the gleam of a watch, men who couldn't imagine a farmer walking into their world with more than just dirt on his hands. But Matthew also knew something else. Men like Elliot rarely saw the full picture. I'm aware of what it is, Matthew said firmly. That's why I'm here. Elliot raised an eyebrow, but before he could respond, another man approached, dressed in a similar suit but with a friendlier demeanor. He greeted Elliot with a quick nod before turning to Matthew. Good morning, the newcomer said. I'm Tom. Can I answer any questions for you? Matthew shook his hand. Matthew Parker. I'm interested in purchasing a jet for business transport. I'd like to know more about this one. Tom glanced at Elliot, sensing the tension but choosing to ignore it. Of course, Mr. Parker. The Maverick 300 is an excellent choice. It's versatile and has a maximum cargo capacity of 2.500 pounds. Would you like to step inside? For the first time, Elliot looked genuinely uncomfortable. Matthew could feel the shift in energy but decided to stay focused. Yes, he said, gesturing toward the jet. Let's take a look. As they climbed the steps into the sleek cabin, Matthew couldn't shake the feeling that this was far from the end of Elliot's doubts, but he was prepared to face them head-on. Inside, the cabin was pristine, with leather seats that gleamed under soft interior lighting. The layout spoke of wealth and convenience, seating for a handful of people, polished tables for in-flight work, and enough space to stretch out and enjoy the ride. Tom guided Matthew through the features, explaining everything from the onboard navigation system to the fuel efficiency. Impressive, Matthew said, his tone thoughtful. He ran his hand over the armrest of one of the chairs, imagining the crates of fresh produce he could load and the cities he could reach. Elliot lingered near the door, his arms crossed. He wasn't bothering to mask his skepticism anymore. You'd need to make some modifications, he said sharply. Jets like this aren't typically used for hauling produce. Matthew turned to face him, his expression calm but piercing. And yet they can be, he replied. Efficiency is efficiency, no matter what you're transporting. Tom cleared his throat, sensing the tension. It's true, he said, stepping in. We've had clients customize jets for various business purposes. It's all about meeting your needs. Mr. Parker. Matthew smiled slightly, appreciating Tom's professionalism, but he knew Elliot wasn't done.